Hi, everyone, and welcome to AB Conversations, where we will help you CFP your way out of it. A podcast where you get into the minds of a couple certified financial planners on how we think and feel about everyday financial planning questions and what should really matter most to you. A healthier financial life starts now. So when we're talking planning, usually the last thing that we get to, unless it's their fire, we want to go through the process of making sure an estate plan is complete, right? And when we say complete, even when we ask people, we like to think that, yes, we've checked that box, it's finished. But in reality, things change in life, right? It's an estate plan is something people need to maintain, right? As their life, as laws, assets, relationships change. This episode, we want to really focus on not just, hey, did you get this done? But for you to start thinking about your estate plan as a living, very human document, not just a legal one.
Yeah, exactly. And we see it all the time, right? We ask new people coming in, to our business that is, do you have your estate documents done? And we often get the answer, yes. And then the natural follow-up, when was the last time they were reviewed? Or maybe, when were they created? And then we come to find out, well, that might have been, 20, 30 years ago when the kids were
Mm,
little, we set it up, right? So, yeah, it makes it very easy to say, yes, we checked the box, but as we know, things change over time, and we would just want to make sure that it's still accurate and still reflects their situation.
yeah, I think we can confidently say, which is why we're throwing this out there today, even if you have one, you may need to refresh it. Estate plans
Yeah,
don't fail. For some people, if you don't have the documents, right, the estate plan is going to fail.
yeah,
But if you do have the documents, you're still susceptible to things, right? If they are outdated, if things are misaligned to the people, places, and things that matter most to you, and if they're just disconnected from the reality of how things may get settled or how the people in your life will feel emotionally about how they're settled. So let's go through
yeah,
it. No better time than the present for maybe a quick refresh. Let's go through some of those things that would absolutely necessitate, let's just say, a review, like a good conversation.
yeah. The easiest one, I think, right off the top is just any change in life, right? Retirement being a big kind of transition. If I owned a business, did I sell that business at some point, or do I still control an interest there that I need to factor in to any estate planning, later in life? Kids, grandkids, deaths,
Mhm.
remarriages, all
Yeah.
of these family things, or just, the life changes that just happen over time, they need to be addressed, right? This isn't one of those things that we just set it and forget it. Those what may feel like minor changes can have hugely impactful, domino effects later in life if it's never reviewed. It can have those unintended consequences that we would just want people to be able to avoid.
Yeah, so let's start with maybe some examples, and it's not to scare people into activity here, but if that's the outcome, maybe that's still a good thing, right? A client calls yesterday. Sadly, her daughter's getting a divorce. I can, in my own head now, think about, well, how were certain things titled, all the way
Mm,
down to, God forbid, something happens to their daughter before something happens to them. Where is that money, and would they want the children's father to be involved in overseeing that, or is there some other way of setting that up? That's a very common case of relationships have now changed.
mm,
This
mm.
is sadly more common than, people would want it to be on the day you say I do, but this is the reality. That's a very common case where things may be now misaligned.
Well, and not only that, I feel like I can't even count the number of times we hear from clients with adult children that is, this child is doing okay. They're doing better than we ever did at that age, but this other child may need a little bit more, support than the other. So the our saying, or the saying of fair is not always equal and equal is not always fair, right? When these documents may have been written when the children were minors, everything gets split equally. Does that still reflect what the parents would want in that situation? Flash forward, 20, 30 years into the future? Maybe not. That's not an uncommon conversation for us to have.
Or let's go to the next one. So then maybe a trust is set up. If that's either to protect a child from something, right? The responsibility of an inheritance, or we had situation where there are clients that have special needs trusts for kids that, whether it's for governmental assistance or again to protect themselves from finances that they may not be able to keep, Great, that
Hmm.
trust was set up. But now is every financial account you have listing that trust as a beneficiary or not? And if
Yeah.
those are not updated, right now we found a leak in the ship here that could, sink it.
I think so. Even just to that end, I think when we say estate planning, it's not just the documents, it's not just, the will, but it is making sure that the beneficiary designations are also either aligned to that, or it's just crystal clear that these things can work independently, where your beneficiary designation is going to supersede whatever it says in the will. So to your point, when there are more complex situations, you just want to be 100% certain that if I'm not here tomorrow, that everything's going to go the way that I think it should go.
Yeah, I think I'll maybe pivot. Again, there are a lot of life changes that can happen. There are a lot of asset changes that happen. For you using the example, hey, we did the right thing. We set up this will when our kids were minors. Now we're retired, or maybe we've been in retirement for a little bit. Now
Yeah.
these retirement accounts are bigger. Now we've got different types of accounts. Like we said, maybe more complex beneficiary setups. As
Mm.
your assets change, I'll give one very quick story, and then you can jump into whatever point you want to make here. We have a client that very intentionally reviews this every year, right? And if she's got, I'm not going to exaggerate, a dozen different types of accounts or things that make up her estate, she probably
Mm.
has more than a dozen different institutions, people, place, things that matter to her. Where every
Mm.
January, like I owe her this document like yesterday, every January we go through that process of, well, let's just see what the actual value of these things are and what percentage to what beneficiary. How does that actually shake out as a dollar amount? And for
Right.
most people, assets have really, the market has really done well these last couple of years. You may think, hey, well, this person's getting a 10% piece of my estate. 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but maybe from a dollar standpoint, it is. It just it gives her the ability
Yeah.
to reflect on that and be very intentional, right? Assets change over
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. And the other part of it too is what changes over time, as we've seen. The rules around certain accounts, or just the tax changes that we
Mm,
see, what feels like every few years. So we don't need to get into the nitty gritty details of, what could have changed over time. But the point is, those tax rules change over time, and that can impact how you may want to leave things to kids or grandkids or to charity, you name it. Just those changes that, again, just yes, the document is done. Let me check that box. But if somebody did their estate plan 30 years ago, the tax code has probably changed 9 times, eight
yeah.
times, something
Mm.
like that over that time period. So you would just, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. We just want to be sure that with all of these potential changes over the course of somebody's life, right? It's the three. It's what has changed in my life, what are my assets doing, or why my financial changes, but then it's the tax changes on top of that. So you put all of those three things together, it can take you in so many different directions.
So then let's get very practical, very real here. I know I probably jumped to some of this when we were just talking about the reasons to
Mm.
consider, reviewing these things or the changes in your life. But let's go through like the things we often come across that are just wrong. And I'll start because I kind of went there a little early. Just
Hmm.
beneficiaries that no longer make sense. Right?
Yeah.
I will forever remember the story. I couldn't have been in the business for more than 2 or 3 years. I hope these people are still alive and well. But at that time, I came to meet them because they went through tragedy. Their son had passed away, freak accident, right? Was young at life. I believe he was only in his 40s, not married, had a sizable 401k because he had just been working and stashing it away. The beneficiary of that 401k was an ex-girlfriend who he had not been
Mm.
with for more than 10 years, right?
Wow.
And I don't even know how that all shaked out other than to tell
Mm.
you, listening audience, right? By law, she inherited that money. So I realize that's a horrible case, but whether it is, again, ex-spouses, splits in relationship, you had mentioned the kids are now adults, special needs situations. You really need to
Yeah.
account for all of this. And we will often see, even for our own clients, right? We want to go through the process as often as we can of just going, hey, does this still look okay? Hey, you had another grandchild, right? If we were listing them
Yeah.
individually, we don't want one now excluded, right? It's just a good practice.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's just on the beneficiary side. Then you take that one step further, who am I naming in my estate documents as my
Yeah.
executor or my power of attorney or the trustee of a trust, right? Those can change over time. Where we often see that is, for some older individuals that maybe don't have the kids or grandkids or somebody obvious to name, they're naming siblings or spouses or friends or other people their age, and time is not promised, right? We've run into many scenarios where the people that are named to carry out a document or essentially execute somebody's will, they're no longer here. So
Yeah.
having not only contingents, or again, just making sure that if something happened to me yesterday, does everything I have listed in this document still apply? And the people who are in line to execute on a document like that, making sure they're still alive, but also willing, right? They have to be able to step into that role. And sometimes the most normal thing we see is for a couple who has children, they often name the oldest child as the
Yeah.
executor.
Right.
That's the default, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the most qualified or they're the best fit to play that role. So sometimes it is
Bingo.
now
Yeah.
now we're in retirement, kids are grown. Would I want to make a change? Is there somebody who may be able to fill this role better than another and not necessarily just stick to the default because that's the default?
Yeah. Then, yes, that's really, really well said. So I'm going to leave that one alone, even though
Yeah.
we could be there all day. I
Yeah.
was sadly going through, thinking about my own situation. So retirement accounts or financial accounts and the estate plan, right? We need people to remember that these are two different things. So let's say you do update your will. You do think about wanting to change the people involved, the persons, the roles, the beneficiaries. If the will says one thing and the IRA or the financial account says another, the beneficiary form is going to win. That supersedes the will. So
Mhm.
we will see this, and I know you kind of opened the podcast with this. Hey, did you get this done? People proudly say yes. Well, there is that second step, right? If these things
Yeah.
are to match, then it is going to every financial account institution that you have and making sure that is updated as well.
Yeah. And I think often when we think about estate planning, the first thing that comes to mind is when I'm not here, what does my will essentially make happen? But that's only one possible scenario, right? We don't have a ton of experience in here, thank goodness, but it's the plan for incapacitation, right? I'm not just completely gone. I'm here, but I'm incapacitated. I can't make these decisions anymore. And that's where making sure you have a power of attorney, having a healthcare directive, these things in place that either you've already documented what you would want to see happen, or again, you're naming somebody to help make those decisions if you can't. And when we think about estate planning, again, I think that default is, well, I have a will, so I'm good. But there are some other documents that we would
For
say are
sure.
absolutely necessary. And it's one of those, oh, what's the saying? It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Bingo. Yeah. Maybe piggybacking on that, I think where we also see things, I hate to use the word fail, but things
Yeah.
not work, whether that's during life or certainly at death, it's that, okay, you had these instructions, but there also may have been no guidance around those instructions, right? Documents say what happens, but either not why or the context, or I'm starting to think of again, a different situation where, there may be family heirlooms or,
Yeah.
precious art, things that have value. And maybe this is something that you want passed down to your kids, but they would have no idea how to handle it, right? Maybe it is, well, if I don't care if they want to sell it, but if it's fine art, like how? What do you
Yeah.
know? What is that institutional like knowledge that you have around how this may have been handled while you were alive? I'm just using that as one example, kind of
Yeah.
recently popping in my head, but there's two different things at play here. It's the instructions within the documents, but there
Mm.
also should be something often that goes with that I love you letter on here's why this
Yeah.
matters, or here's how to handle it, or here's where you can find these precious things.
Yeah. So I think that is so, so important. And certainly that is like, we're just kind of digging layer into layer, meaning check the box on those who have a state plan, check the box, go one step further. Who has all of the documents? Go one step further. Does it still apply? But then that last part of, but it's not just are my wishes clearly documented, but to your point, it's the emotional side behind it, right? we often hear from people, well, I know my dad said this, that he would have wanted this.
Hmm.
But with multiple people involved, maybe they have different recollections of what dad would have wanted in that scenario. Having it documented, like you said, maybe that's
Yeah.
not in an official estate document, but it is that I love you letter, right? When I'm not, here's the intent behind. I'm naming these people because here's what I want to see happen. I think just that extra level of kind of detail hopefully eliminates potential conflict.
Yeah, because for a lot of people, and I'll even include myself in this, not as young as I once was, when you're forced to kind of think about this, it can get uncomfortable, right? Nobody seeks out conflict or to be perceived as unfair, especially if there's multiple parties. Again, all
Hmm.
families have their own dynamics. Thinking about death and even talking about death is just not fun.
Hmm.
But the reality is, if you don't, these people are still left with that bag to carry, right? So
Yeah.
if there can be a way, I realize there's a very human element of this, but if there can be a way to make estate planning not about feeling like there's right or wrong or I'm controlling people or I'm not, but just about reducing any confusion or potential conflict that could happen anyway. To your point, it's let's not guess what mom and dad would have said or
Yeah.
would have wanted. Let's find a way to have a conversation about it, or at least put something in writing. So even if it's not the what could be awkward in
Yeah.
conversation, it's at least something that's on record on what really mattered to you and why.
Very well said. And I think that's where we are trying to play a role for many of our clients and just having that conversation, right? We don't want this whole idea, and there's so many reasons why people get to the estate planning stuff last, myself included. Like I'll throw myself under the bus. It is just it's not a fun topic to kind of think about, but again, it's so important. So to take away as like I have this legal task that I just need to get done and just view it through the lens of this is a conversation. And again, this
Yeah.
is where we play this role for our clients, right? Let's just have the planning conversation around something happened to me yesterday. What would happen? And does that align with what I would want to see happen? So I think maybe just taking the pressure off of what these feel like just big, heavy conversations, and they are, but to just take a different approach to just we don't need to decide everything today, but let's just talk through the different options. Let's view this as a planning conversation. And then from there, we can decide
Yeah.
what needs to change, if anything, and then decide what are those actual, micro steps to enact a change if it's necessary.
Yeah. We certainly want to be the safe space to start that conversation if you
Yeah.
haven't already had it. But then maybe the call to action here is if you do have these estate documents, pull them out. To
Oh,
your
yeah.
point, look at the dates, look at the names, ask yourself, are these people still the most important people in my life? Does this still match what I would want? And if it
Yeah.
doesn't, right, you haven't failed. You're still here to go through that exercise
Yeah.
and just update it.
Yep.
And if it does fit, then again, we want to help not only then take the next step if you haven't and have the conversations with the people that matter, but know that, at least if you're working with us, we're going to ask you to review it again, probably in
Yeah.
another year or two or three or whatever it is.
Yeah. I guess the important part of all of this is just that review is just so critical. Just again, to make sure that what you have, if you have it, still applies. And if it does, great. Put it back in the box, put it back in the filing cabinet, put it back in the safe, whatever. And yeah, review it again in a couple years and do that in perpetuity. If you never need to change it, great. But if and when that time comes, which for many of our clients, it's
I'm sure it
many,
will.
many times that little things need to be updated. It's better to catch it while you still can than deal with the consequences when you're gone.
Bingo. Thank you, sir. Well said.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
no time like the present.
Yeah.
2026, get that review done.
Rip the Band-Aid.
See ya. Till next time.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Adam and I really appreciate you tuning in. Please note that the opinions we voiced in the show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be most appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to making any decisions or investing. Thanks for listening.